The Something You Should Know podcast today is sponsored by Boostability. When people search for what your business sells, they're not really looking in the yellow pages anymore. They're searching online. So your business website needs to rank high in search engine results. To find out how your website performs now and to find ways to help it perform better, go to myfreewebsitescore.com. There, you'll get your free website score and analysis with some ideas on how to help your website perform better. myfreewebsitescore.com from Boostability. Today on Something You Should Know, do you get too many emails? There's a clever way to reduce the number of emails and also save you a boatload of time. And helicopter parents, what are they doing to the next generation?
Kids today are what they call failure deficient. Failure deprived is what people at Stanford and Harvard are saying about their own students. Their every moment has been perfectly manicured and cultivated. They've never failed, and they get to college and bad things happen. They don't know what to do.
Plus, are we doing enough to keep people safe on our roads?
We have this terminology where we call car crashes accidents. We have virtually no accidents. You don't accidentally distract yourself with your cell phone while you're driving at 65 miles an hour and then fly off the road.
And what do you do when you find a spider in your house? Do you kill it? Do you put it outside? What you really need to know about the spiders in your home. All of this today on Something You Should Know.
Something you should know. Fascinating intel, the world's top experts, and practical advice you can use in your life today. The Something You Should Know podcast with Mike Carruthers.
Hi, I'm Mike Carruthers. Welcome to the podcast today. I'm hoping that maybe by the end of the episode today, I can convince you to head over to iTunes and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes, and there are some great episodes coming up. And if you rate and review, well, that helps me and the podcast, and it also will make you eligible to win a $100 Amazon gift card we're giving away every week. You just leave your rating and review, and then once it's published, you take a screenshot of it, and then just email it to me. info@somethingyoushouldknow.net is the email address, and then you're automatically eligible to win that week's $100 Amazon gift card. Now, today we have some fascinating subjects that are of particular interest to me, parenting being one of them. I became a parent fairly late in life, and I now have an 11-year-old son and a 6-year-old foster son, and that's a story all in and of itself. And I love being a dad. And like many other people, I have noticed that parenting is very different today. There is a lot of what you've heard the term helicopter parenting, parents who are so involved in their kids' lives that it's having some very severe unintended consequences when those kids get older. And I'm going to be speaking with one of the top experts on this. If you've ever been a parent, if you are a parent, if you're planning to become a parent, you really need to hear this discussion. Also, there is something going on America's highways that is just absolutely horrible, and we're just all kind of collectively in denial about it. So many people are being injured and killed on America's highways, and we have accepted it as the price we're willing to pay in order to be able to drive. We even call them traffic accidents, implying that, well, it was nobody's fault. And yet, virtually all the injuries and deaths in car crashes are the result of people being distracted, of people driving too fast, or being under the influence. It's people who are killing other people. And I think there's this impression that cars are safer, fewer people are dying and being injured. And maybe that's true, but the number of people who are still dying and being injured will astound you. And my guest will be talking about what's being done about this, why this problem continues to persist, and what we can all do to help solve this problem. It really is a terrible problem. And the first thing I want to talk about today is the spiders in your home. Every home has spiders in them. Now, when you find a spider, what do? You either kill it or you put it outside. Well, those are pretty much the only options you have. You could adopt it as a pet, but it turns out, according to this guy, Rod Crawford, who is a University of Washington spider expert, fewer than 5% of all the spiders you find in your house came in from outside or have ever been outside. They were born in your house. Consequently, they don't have spider smarts. They don't have street smarts. So when you put them outside, they have no idea how to deal with weather and predators, and pretty much their days are numbered. Spiders get domesticated very quickly, so when you set them outdoors, you think you're doing them a favor, but you're likely sending them to their doom. Of course, smacking them with a shoe doesn't do them much good either. The good news is, though, that spiders in the house are not the danger that a lot of people think, and it's a myth that spiders are aggressive. All species of spiders, without exception, will run at the first sign of trouble. So it's unlikely that spiders are climbing into your bed and biting you in the middle of the night. So if you find little red bumps on your skin that you think are spider bites you're getting while you're sleeping, chances are it's something else. It's probably not spiders. Even brown recluse and black widow spiders, which Rod Crawford, the spider expert, says are two types of spiders whose bites actually can do damage to human beings, are unlikely to sink their teeth into you unless they're provoked. So in essence, spiders really just aren't much of a problem. And that's something you should know. My first guest today is here to talk about the topic of parenting, or more precisely, overparenting, or helicopter parenting. This is a relatively new phenomenon where parents are so involved in every aspect of their child's lives, and that's having a real effect on those children when those children grow up to be adults. Julie Lythcott Haims is an educator and author of the book How to Raise an Adult. Welcome, Julie, and let's start with when this whole thing, this overparenting, helicopter parenting, first started. And maybe more importantly, why?
The first set of parents to come to college campus and want to be very involved in the lives of their college-age sons and daughters did so in the late 1990s. So I backed up to see what was happening in the early 80s. And here's what I found. Stranger danger was born in the early 80s. The self-esteem movement was born. A Nation at Risk was published saying kids needed more testing and to be taught to the test. And the Playdate was born. If you think about it, all of these things entailed adults encroaching into domains that were previously the realm of children. Parents were hovering over play and school and activities, really getting inside kids' minds. And so these kids were the college students who first had parents wanting to accompany them and do the thinking and the doing and the planning and the problem solving in college. That's how we got here.
Okay, but how does a parent go from seeing these things, these stranger danger and play dates and testing, how do you go from seeing that to thinking, okay, well, let me do everything?
Well, I think with all of these fears around strangers and homework and needing to praise kids and attend to their every moment, they just began being involved in micromanaging their kids' daily lives. And so they couldn't back off when it came time to send their kid to college. Their kid was accustomed to mom or dad being there right by their side, and mom or dad were quite accustomed to that as well. They essentially were quite intertwined with their own kid and couldn't fathom backing off because, in a sense, they knew their kid didn't have what it took to fend for themselves.
Well, with parents like that, they probably don't.
That's exactly my point, and that's why I've written this book, because this is the millennial generation we're talking about, and it's by no means all of them, but it's a growing number each year I was observing on my campus who didn't seem to know how to fend for themselves. And I thought, well, gee, that's not good for them, and it sure won't be good for a nation that's going to want to hand the mantle of leadership off to the millennials to run our corporations and our nonprofits and our schools, our government, and our families.
Do you suspect, or maybe you know from the experience of talking and witnessing and observing these types of parents and their children, that their parents are the ones that are doing it know they're doing it, or they think they're just being parents?
You know, look, I'm a parent myself. I've got 2 teenagers, and so I'm not criticizing parents so much as I'm saying, hey, folks, we're focusing on the wrong goal. Most people don't want to be thought of as a helicopter parent. They just don't appreciate that their behaviors are, in fact, over-parenting, doing too much of the protecting of their kids, too much of the directing of what path their kids will follow, the activities in schools, and a lot of hand-holding, the filling out forms and reminding them of deadlines, waking them up, making all their food, doing all their chores for them. So parents don't realize it. They think they're being helpful and loving. We love our kids fiercely. We have a lot of fears that they won't make it out there in the world if we're not helping them. And often we achieve short-term wins when we do help them. They get a higher grade if we help, if we do their math homework. But the trouble is, long-term, our kid hasn't built the skills and the mindsets so that they can be capable out in the workplace and in college.
So for those whose kids are already in college, are you speaking, is it too late for them and you're speaking to the next group, or are there things parents can do now to try to fix the damage done?
I think it's never too late, but it's great to start early. I'm hearing from a lot of millennials who are 20-somethings who are saying, I think I was overparented, now what do I do? And I encourage them that just recognizing it is the first step, and the second step is to sit down with yourself and with your folks and think, what are 3 things I can do for myself? What are 3 arenas in which I want more independence? Maybe it's paying my own bills. Maybe it's being the one to rent my own apartment and talk to the landlord, negotiate the lease. Maybe it's, driving someplace a long distance on my own. Whatever, this sounds absurd to people who are older, by the way, but plenty of millennials don't have these skills, and they know it. And, they know they need to develop those skills. And so if you're a parent of a 20-something who doesn't seem to have the wherewithal, time is now. The time is short. The time is now. Sit down with them and figure out, okay, how can we backtrack and kind of fill in some of these gaps that, with the best of intentions, we managed not to teach you in your childhood.
Are parents, when they try too hard, is it just that they're doing the wrong thing or they're doing too much?
They're doing too much. It comes down to this. A human becomes themselves by doing the work of life. Somebody can become chronologically adult, but if another human has done the thinking, the planning, and the problem-solving for them, they essentially are existentially impotent. They cannot be and do and think for themselves, which causes great psychological harm and means they don't have the skills that are going to be needed in the workplace. Okay? Too much has been done for them. It's like they've been marched down their own life path, but someone else has really guided them, and they really have arrived at a destination without having gotten there themselves. They lack a competence and the confidence that comes from being competent.
So it isn't a matter of doing something different. It's a matter of just backing off.
It is a matter of backing off. And again, as a parent myself, I know we have the best of intentions, but our job as parents is to put ourselves out of a job, Mike. We need to know our kids have got it. We don't like to think about that inevitable day when we're gone, but one day, if the universe unfolds as it should, we predecease them, not the other way around. So we need to know that our kids have the skills. We often absolve them these days of things like chores, which have been done by humans over the course of human existence, but nowadays, particularly in middle and upper middle class communities, we're kind of letting our kids off the hook. We're hiring somebody to do that work, or we're doing it for them because they're so busy with all their activities. Turns out chores are the greatest predictor of professional success in life, according to a really important study called the Harvard Grant Study. It's not the brand name of the school you go to. It's that you did chores as a child. It's very intuitive. It teaches them to do for themselves. It teaches them to roll up the sleeves and pitch in and do the unpleasant things in life. That's the kind of mindset a boss wants to see, not some entitled kid who expects always to be told what to do and wants to be patted on the back for every little thing they do.
So, wait, tell me about this study. That's fascinating, and I haven't heard of this before, that chores is a better predictor of later life than what school you go to.
Yeah, so it's something called the Harvard Grant Study that was conducted over many, many decades, starting with guys who were in a class in the late 1930s at Harvard, all Harvard graduates, and they studied them throughout their life. And they discovered that the greatest predictor of professional success was not that the guys had all gone to Harvard, but that they did chores as a child, and the younger you start with the chores, the more professionally successful they were. Another major finding from that study is that happiness equals love, full stop. That's what the report actually says. So happiness in life comes from the extent to which we have loving relationships with spouses and partners and family and friends. And so in my view, Mike, it all boils down to chores and love. If I've prepared my kids for the hard work of life, a pitch-in, can-do, I should help out mindset, and they're capable of loving and being loved, the rest, what they do for a living, what schools they attend, that's all the details. That should be up to them and, their interests and their motivations. I just want to know they can work hard and love and be capable of loving others.
Isn't that fascinating?
It is fascinating. Look, we've gotten duped into thinking that there are only a small subset of colleges that matter, and that's what I call the U.S. News and World distort. There are 2,800 schools in this great nation, and I'd wager, as with anything, the top 5% are fantastic. That's 140 schools, most of which don't have cutthroat admissions rates. So I've really finally myself bought into that mindset. Sure, there was a time when I thought, I want my kids to go to Stanford. I went there. I worked there. Why wouldn't I want them to go there? The trouble is only 5% of the applicants are getting in. Why am I steering my kid toward that expectation? They feel, 95% of those applicants feel like failures. If you get in and that's where you want to go, great. But rest assured that a fantastic education is to be had at, I would say, 140 schools, not to mention great community colleges that can also prepare you really well for the next steps in life. And then if we accept that, then we can back off a little and relax and not feel that every moment is make or break in our child's childhood. We can tolerate their failure, which, by the way, is the only way a human learns. Kids today are what they call failure deficient, failure deprived is what people at Stanford and Harvard are saying about their own students. Their every moment has been perfectly manicured and cultivated. They've never failed, and they get to college and bad things happen. They don't know what to do. This is a parenting failure, not to teach our kids the lessons that come from failure or to act as if our own lives were perfectly led.
And we see this all the time. I mean, we've all seen kids overreact when they don't do well on a test, or they can't handle disappointment and failure because it's all been cushioned for them their entire life.
Exactly. It's been cushioned for them, and as we hover over them, cushioning everything, we also are creating the expectation that they'll be perfect. So whenever anything goes wrong, it really is dialed up in terms of how it hits them in their own being. They just feel like, wait a minute, I'm in college now. I've finally gotten to this college. I've been great so far. Now I've gotten a B- or worse, and I feel like the anomaly. I feel inadequate. I don't have any way to cope with this. And the colleges are having to teach students, look, you're vulnerable. We're all vulnerable. This is to be human, is to be imperfect. It's okay. You still matter. You're still good enough as a human. Work. You can work harder. You don't have to feel that somehow your life is over because this particular thing didn't go your way.
This is so fascinating because I've heard a lot of talk about the overparenting, the helicopter parenting, and all of that. But that study is so interesting because it drives the nail deep into the wood there. That's it. I mean, it's almost as simple as that.
It is. And Mike, the one thing that I will add here is, when we reach a certain level in our own lives, we have a certain degree of affluence and influence, particularly now in the 21st century with all the technology and 24/7, 365 access to information. We think we can control and perfect every outcome, not only in our own lives, but in our kids' lives. And there's a lot of hubris in that and a lot of our own ego wrapped up in our kids' accomplishments. We feel better about ourselves when we slap a particular school's, bumper sticker across the back of our car. And we've really got to get our own egos out of it. It's unhealthy for our kids. Our kids' accomplishments are their accomplishments, but many of us say, look what we've done. We've gotten into this college. No, you're taking away from your son or daughter when you behave that way. It's their life. You have your life. They have theirs. We all love each other. But, hey, we want them to be competent and confident, to be able to work hard, not just expect they can always look over their shoulder and find us there to make the tough phone call or to fill their car with gas and everything in between.
Oh, God. This really is an important topic for everybody. I mean, for parents, for educators, for employers. This is a big deal, and you've explained it really, really well. Thank you, Julie. Julie Lythcott Haims is author of the book, How to Raise an Adult. There is a link to her book and her website on our website, somethingyoushouldknow.net. In a moment, what's going on America's highways? That's next on Something You Should Know. The podcast today is sponsored by Boostability, the leader in search engine optimization for small business. Now, not all that long ago, if people were searching for what your business sells or what you do, they would look in the yellow pages or they'd ask a friend. But nobody's looking in the yellow pages anymore. When was the last time you looked in the yellow pages for something? Everybody's searching online. So it's critical that when people search for what you sell, your website shows up at the top of the search engine results. And that's what Boostability does. They help thousands of clients get to the top of search engine results when people search for what they sell. And you need to do it too. Search engine optimization is too important to leave to, somebody's nephew's brother who knows a little bit about it. You need professional search engine results for your business, and that's what Boostability does. Now, what I suggest you do is go to their website, myfreewebsitescore.com. They have this thing set up where you can find out how well your website performs right now. Just put in some information and you'll instantly get back your website score and free analysis to see how well your website performs now in searches and what you can do to make it perform better. myfreewebsitescore.com. myfreewebsitescore.com from Boostability. Americans love to drive, and we pay a big price for the privilege of getting in the car and going. And in some ways, we're really in denial about the size of the price we pay. Edward Haims is a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist who has looked at this and really all things transportation related. Not only how people get from here to there, but how things get from here to there. And what he has to say is really fascinating. Welcome, Edward.
Glad to be here.
So let's start with this whole idea of the freedom of the American road, that Americans love the privilege of being able to get in their car and go, and we don't want anybody interfering. We just want to go.
We do. Oh, yeah. And of course, that's one of the great breakthroughs of the interstate system constructed began in the 1950s under President Eisenhower. It made it possible to drive both people and goods coast to coast in a way that was once far more arduous to attempt. But that was the last time we had a building boom in our transportation system under the Eisenhower administration. If you take away the Depression-era FDR public works, like the Lincoln Tunnel and the Golden Gate Bridge and all these monuments to transportation, and you take away the interstate highway building boom from the 50s to the early 70s, we spend far less on transportation than most other developed nations as a function of our gross domestic product. We actually underinvest, except for we've had two big booms in the last century, and other than that, we've been very cheap on our spending. Even though we imagine that we pay exorbitantly, we actually contribute a lot less than our peers around the world. China outspends us 10 to 1 on their transportation infrastructure.
You say that a year on the road in America inflicts more casualties, death, and serious injury than all Americans killed or wounded in all the wars we have ever fought.
Yes, from the Revolutionary. I had to check those numbers 10 times before I could even believe it myself, even though I had them right in front of me, because it is unbelievable. 1 year on the road. And this is a function of our design and our hubris and just old ways of thinking that makes it so dangerous when we put humans behind the wheels of our cars on the current configuration of roads. But yeah, and I'm only counting the injuries that send somebody to the emergency room, not just.
So why do you suppose that has become an acceptable level of casualties that Americans are willing to pay that price to drive?
We've become normalized to it. First of all, we have this terminology where we call car crashes accidents. We have virtually no accidents. What we have are about a third of fatal crashes caused by drunks behind the wheel. We have nearly as many caused by people speeding excessively to the point where it is the contributing cause to a fatal crash. And we have people driving distracted. Where, you don't accidentally distract yourself with your cell phone while you're driving at 65 miles an hour and then fly off the road or fly over the center line and into an oncoming car. That's not an accident. So that there's over 90% of our crashes that kill people are due to those three causes, and yet we've used a terminology that allows us to brush it off like some sort of inevitability. That's the way it just has to be. That's the price of our mobility.
Yeah. I remember somebody talking once about that we should change that terminology, that it is not an accident, that it's a crash, and we should call it that. But it's never caught on. People still call it a traffic accident.
Yeah, well, it's starting to catch on a little bit, and I think when we start to change that terminology, that's a beginning. But you look at how we've turned our nation and our freedoms and our privacy upside down in the war on terror. And the number of Americans who have actually been killed and injured through acts of terrorism is about 3 months on the road in the U.S., as opposed to the terrorism casualties of the last 12 years, since 9/11, 15 years.
So is the driverless car going to be the answer?
Well, it's an answer. It's a long-term answer. It will take away 90% of the traffic crashes that kill people because robots don't drink. They don't get distracted, and I rode around in the Google car, one of many driverless prototypes, and it is the slowest car on the road you're driving it because it's the only one obeying the speed limit. It gets rear-ended because it follows the law. So, driverless cars are a great solution. In the short term, we already have technology that could prevent automobiles from speeding. I mean, we already have cruise control in them that regulates the speed of a car. It could just be set to match the prevailing speed limit on any road you're on. We have the technology is sitting there. We could stop speeding. There's lockout devices. The Department of Transportation is experimenting right now with prototypes where the sensors in a steering wheel sniff your skin and know if you're drunk or not. I mean, this is real. It's not science fiction. We could prevent drunk driving if we had the will to do so. It would add a couple $100 to the price of a car, but it would save thousands and thousands of lives and hundreds of millions of dollars in losses. So we could, short of having a full autonomy, we could have very simple technology that prevents 90% of our crashes if we have the will to do it. As I said, we freak out when an airliner crashes, but the toll on our roads is like having 8 fully packed airliners crash every week.
Yikes.
So our priorities are just a little out of whack, and one of the reasons I set out to write this book was because so much of the transportation world, both the human side of it and the economic side of it, the business side, is obscured from us because it's so big, it's so ever-present that we don't see it anymore. So. Well,
we see it when, there's doing construction on the road. And then the thing you say about adding lanes to freeways makes traffic worse, which, how can that be? Because the whole purpose of adding lanes is to accommodate more cars.
Exactly. And so it does. More cars come. I call it the field of dreams syndrome. If you build it, they will come. Traffic abhors a vacuum like nature, and so the traffic engineers call it induced demand. As soon as you add to the space cars can occupy it, more cars come to occupy it. So it's not a very good solution. And the example I use is the famous Carmageddon event in the Los Angeles area a few years back. This was a project to add, at the cost of $1.3 billion, a lane to a 10-mile stretch of the I-405 freeway, major north-south and often congested conduit. In fact, Elon Musk, the founder of Tesla, commutes on it, and he calls it the traffic on it soul-killing. It drives him insane. That's why he is also in favor of driverless technology. But anyway, the idea was to ease the congestion on 405, but this new lane. But after the 405 reopened during rush hour, that 10-mile trip actually takes a little bit longer, a minute to 2 minutes longer than it did before the construction. The oddity was that the Carmageddon part, this car plus Armageddon idea, was when the whole 10-mile stretch of the 405 was closed down for a long weekend while they could widen some lanes and knock down some bridges to make room for them. And that was going to be a disaster. It was going to be regional gridlock because all those cars that normally are on the 405 were going to have to go somewhere where there was no room for them.
But it wasn't.
It wasn't. It was Karma Heaven, not Carmageddon. Traffic was never better than when we took away all those lanes. And that paradox really explains why adding lanes isn't often a good solution. And yet, if you can do things that get people to change their driving behavior, that has an amazing effect on transportation. In this case, it was people got the message that it might be disastrous, so they changed their habits. They decided to take other forms of transportation, or to take a bike ride, or just stay at home,
or get out of town.
And that points to a more permanent solution of how finding ways to get people to drive at different times. Some communities use something called congestion pricing, where it's like how we regulate electricity. You charge more during peak hours and charge less during off-peak hours, and that encourages people to drive at times when there's more space on the roads, which of course makes more space during peak times as well. So there's voluntary programs where major employers could stagger their start times and move people off the freeways until a little later or a little earlier in the day. Those are ways to solve traffic without a single bulldozer blade.
What about this in terms of moving goods around to people? Amazon's experimenting, and other people are experimenting with drones and things. Is that more of a gimmicky thing now, or is this the future?
I think the idea of little drones landing goods on your doorstep right now is more gimmick than anything. But that said, drones in other forms are almost certainly going to be in the goods movement space. The big carriers like FedEx and UPS and their competitors who fly big airliners laden with cargo, they are pushing hard to have them automated so that these long trans-Pacific flights can be done by giant drones, not little drones. And that would be a huge savings and they believe safety boost for them to avoid the whole fatigue problem with long and repetitive flights. The other place, you can call it a robot, you could call it driverless, but a driverless car is another form of drone. And a lot of people who are very knowledgeable in this field believe that big rig trucks are going to be the first fully automated vehicles, not passenger cars, because the cost savings and potential efficiencies are so compelling that the cargo companies are going to push hard to adopt that technology as soon as possible.
The way goods are moved around the country now seemingly isn't all that different than it was years ago. It's trains and trucks and planes, and you put them on a train and here, and they ship them off, and they go over there. Is it still this? Has it really changed all that much?
Well, in terms of the the actual feel of it, no. Trains and trucks have evolved, but they're fundamentally the same as they have been for many years. What's changed is how we move those goods. It used to be a truck would go to a shopping mall or a major outlet like a Sears and deliver a truckload there. But now those same truckloads are being split up to single deliveries to many home addresses as e-commerce grows. And that ultimately is a traffic multiplier. It puts more trucks and more trips on the road. Even though people aren't driving to the store as much, perhaps, it's still a net gain in traffic, and that's expected to grow by nearly 50% in the next 25 to 30 years. That's a lot more trucks on the road than we're now experiencing.
Well, it's a fascinating topic that really touches everyone's lives, and we don't really talk about it so much. We just get in the car and drive. So thanks for sharing all that with us today, Edward.
You bet.
Edward Haims is a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist and author of the book Door to Door, The Magnificent, Maddening, Mysterious World of Transportation. And there is a link to his book on our website in the show notes for this podcast at somethingyoushouldknow.net. Finally today on Something You Should Know, email. If you get too many emails, there's very often a reason why. It's all the back and forth trying to clarify what you meant in the last email, or the person misunderstood, or wait, there's one more question, or when it would be a lot easier to just hop on the phone and talk it out. Another problem with email is that people don't read them all the way through. So you can ask somebody 3 questions in an email, but they only answer the first question. Then you have to write back and get answers to the other questions. And it goes on and on and on. So maybe it's time to institute something called the 3 email rule. And Phil Simon, the author of a book called Message Not Received, came up with this. With the 3 email rule, this way you and everyone you email will know if everything isn't settled at the end of 3 emails, you talk. So you simply put the following sentence in your email signature in big capital letters in quotes so people will see it. And it says, I abide by a 3 email rule. After 3, we talk. And Phil says it may take a while, but people will begin to respect that, and you will find that your email load gets a lot lighter. And that's our podcast today, sponsored by Boostability. To find out how well your website performs in search engine results, simply go to myfreewebsitescore.com and get your free website score and analysis to improve your search engine optimization. Just go to myfreewebsitescore.com from Boostability. I'm Mike Carruthers. Thanks for listening.